As promised, Baldoni versus the New York Times. It's Saturday. I'm dressed how I want. If you can't take me seriously wearing a sweatshirt, then that's your problem. Okay, so first of all, before I say anything about this case, I just want to say that suits against publishers is not my area of expertise. I have experience in First Amendment law. I have experience in defamation law. Obviously, I have a lot of experience in civil litigation, but there are people who do publishing law and they are really good at it. I am not one of them. Maybe there'll be somebody on here who will talk to us about this. I will say that it's pretty well known in the lawyer community that the New York Times has incredible lawyers. They have folks who are constantly defending them from stuff like this. It's just that this is the one that we know about. So this particular claim by Baldoni against the New York Times, the focus of this is the how. So the focus of this claim is, regardless of all the other stuff, you, the New York Times, colluded with Blake Lively to publish a story without fully checking out what that story was or if that story was true. Or taking her word for it when she told you all of these things happened. That's sort of the main crux of the Baldoni complaint. My glasses are fogging up. And the other thing they're really pissed off about is that the New York Times told them they were going to publish this article, only gave them 14 hours heads up to say hey, can you give us a statement or give us your comment, which is, standard practice. They started giving their response. They said, we're going to publish it at noon tomorrow. And then they turned around and published it at 10 a.m. Supposedly, according to Baldoni, to be timed exactly with the dropping of Blake Lively's complaint in California. So that's what this is about. But it does get to the issues, and I'm going to tell you how. A lot of you asked, why did he sue them, and why did he sue them in this place? In terms of why in this place, I think I'm going to do a separate video on that because that's jurisdiction and that's its whole own thing. I think from just a civil litigation standpoint, and as someone who's been accused of sexual harassment, it makes all the sense in the world to not sue her. She's the victim, right? You don't want to look like you're bullying her. That's what her whole case is about, is that you bullied her. So sue somebody else. So I think this was a really smart move on his team's part. In terms of the merits, so news organizations have a very wide berth when it comes to what they publish because of the First Amendment. It's a really critical component of our society that news organizations be able to speak about things, speculate on things even sometimes, but have freedom to publish. And there's really only a couple of exceptions where they can be held legally responsible for not doing things right. And the biggest one, of course, is libel, which Justin Baldoni has asserted against them here. Libel is just written defamation. So defamation is publishing something about someone knowing it's not true, and that publication then causing that person damage. Libel is written, slander is spoken, but it's all defamation. You have to think about it, and no matter if you're on a team here, put yourself in the position of this article being about somebody that you don't like, right? What if there's a public figure or a politician and you heard about them suing the New York Times? You'd be like, yeah, well, they're allowed to take a few liberties, right? So just remember that you have to think about it from both sides. Lots of people sue newspapers for libel and say, you said stuff about me that wasn't true, both people you love and people you hate. It's a legitimate claim. So what about this one? Okay. The libel standard is already high, right? You have to prove that it was published and you have to prove that it was false. Put a pin in that for a second. But if you're a public figure, the standard's even higher, because if you're a public figure, you have to show that the publication was done with actual malice. In other words, not only did they know it was false, but they published it anyway, specifically to hurt you, right? Or specifically to help someone else. What Justin Baldoni's lawyers say in this complaint about the New York Times is that that's what they did here, and they did it for clicks. They did it because they wanted this discussion to go on. They wanted people to read the article, and they did it for her benefit because they're in collusion with her, which we'll see if that's true. But When you sue somebody for libel, regardless of what the reasons are, and this is why he included all this stuff relevant to the sexual harassment and retaliation claims that she made in another court, truth is an absolute defense to defamation. So whenever you sue somebody for any type of defamation, you are putting the truth of the statement at issue. So it's a way for him to make a legal claim that makes all of the information about what actually happened relevant without actually having to sue her for stuff that happened on set. That's what the Depp versus Heard case was all about. And I think I might do a whole video on that because I know a lot of people know about that, and it's got a lot of similarities to this one. But you put the truth of the statement at issue, right? Did he actually wage a PR campaign against her that hurt her? Did he actually sexually harass her? So now those things are live in the New York Times case, even though she's not in it. As far as the actual information in the document, some associates or paralegals or wonderful people at Baldoni's lawyer's law firm did a fantastic job going through and saying, like, here's the text messages that were included and here's what they didn't include, all the context around it that they didn't include. That was awesome. Again, you don't usually see that in a complaint. I think that was more for us, but it was really, really well done. I mean, it really showed, everybody cherry picks evidence. That's how the law works, but it really did show that you didn't get the full picture at all. I think the most damning thing in that complaint, for Blake Lively anyway, is a text from him to her saying, do you want to meet with the intimacy coordinator? I'm meeting with her next week. And her saying, no thanks, I'll just meet her when the movie starts. That's really not great for her. Now, just because you say no then doesn't mean that there was, that means you invited all kind of inappropriate behavior. But man, it does not help her credibility on the issue. I know she has specific claims in her charge that she wanted an intimacy coordinator. It's like, well, they got one and you didn't want to meet her. So that one hurts. I'm going to do another thing on the emojis because a lot of people asked about that. The other damning piece of evidence I think that's in here in terms of the reputational stuff is the text between Baldoni and his editors talking about how they've been locked out of seeing their own film while she's editing it. That's, again, with the power dynamic, that's just crazy. Last but not least, the weakest things in this complaint. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but it seems to me that there's some claims that they just threw in there so they could say these things, like the implied contract and promissory fraud, saying you didn't actually give us till the deadline you said you would. I don't think there's any legal liability for that. It's just bad journalistic behavior. And the defamatory headline, like they didn't like the headline about, waging war against her. Everybody knows that the writers don't write the headlines. The headline writers write the headlines. So I just don't think those are particularly strong as a legal matter. But they look interesting. Long story short, I think this was a really smart move. I think it was really well done, and I think it's had exactly the effect that they hoped that it would have. One last thing on the New York Times, they have published other pieces on these issues since the original article that he's pissed off about. Opinion pieces on both sides, people for her, people against him, all of it, which I think is probably really going to help them because they're shoring up the idea that they weren't on anybody's side. So I'll do some separate ones on specific issues, but that's generally Baldoni versus the New York Times.